Welcome to the Well Seasoned Librarian Podcast. I'm Dean Jones, your host. This is Season 6, Episode 6, and today we're having on our program author Carolyn Hennessy, who has written most recently the official Guinness Cookbook. She is rounding out our week of Irish authors in the program for St. Patrick's Day. On Wednesday, we spoke to J.P. McMahon in an encore presentation about Eat Galway and his publication, The Irish Cookbook. And yesterday, we spoke to Dorina Allen, author of many books and the owner and head teacher at the Ballymaloo Cookery School. And today I'm talking to Caroline, who is just magnificent. I really enjoyed getting a chance to talk to her. I really had fun talking about Irish cuisine and the changes in Ireland over the past several years towards food and our attitude around the world towards Irish cuisine. She was a great informative guest, and I really love getting a chance to talk to her. I want to recommend her book, Recipes Using Guinness. It's a really great cookbook, and it's very, very innovative and inspiring. So without further ado, we're going to go to our conversation with Caroline Hennessy. Welcome to the Well Seasoned Librarian Podcast. Today, I have food writer and author Caroline Hennessy. Caroline, welcome to our program.
Thank you very much, Dean. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Now, for our listeners who are not familiar with your work, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I'm a food writer, broadcaster, and I've written 2 books to date. I have been writing about food pretty much for the last 20 years. Back in the year 2000, when the internet was but a pop, I was involved in setting up the first Irish food website. For the national broadcaster at the time. So that didn't last very long. It was the gold rush time of the internet, which didn't stick around, to be honest. But it gave me a taste for, like, I was always interested in food. I always loved reading about food, and I was always interested in writing about it. And it gave me a real taste then for doing it online. At a stage, because I was working predominantly in the online sphere at that stage of my life. So I ended up setting up my own food blog in 2005. And as far as I know, it was one of the very first Irish food blogs. So it was like very much at a time when there was tumbleweed on the scene. You could read your favorite food blogs over coffee at 11 a.m. on a Monday morning, and you wouldn't have to go back to them for another week because people weren't posting so regularly. But it was a really interesting time to be involved in food blogs, and also to be involved in food in Ireland, because Ireland, just around the middle of the 2000s, was just starting to kick off a new interest and pride and love and championing of food in the country. So I was very proud to be part of that.
Now, when I was doing my research on you, I dug up that you have a degree in Irish history from the University of College Cork. What aspect of Irish history were you interested in?
Oh, Dean, you're going to laugh at this. I did my degree in history and English, and then I went on to do a master's in Irish history on the Irish famine.
It's a very important time period and such a huge, impact. It's very palpable.
Yeah, it's so funny because funny, peculiar, I mean here. In terms of what I've always been interested in and always had a love for, then to find myself, obviously, I decided to study the Irish famine. It was 1995, which was the year of a lot of commemorations of what had happened during the Great Irish Famine. And I had a lecturer who was amazing in that area. So I decided I'd do my master's with him. But, I was writing about Indian meal being imported from the
Yeah.
States, and how the Irish people didn't know how to use it, and how it scalded children, and who were people who were used to cooking and eating potatoes. Then they were faced with this thing that they weren't sure what to do. And I was cooking polenta in my kitchen, and I was watching the blips, and I'm like, oh, this is such an alien food, even to people of my parents' generation. So Yeah, I did think it was an interesting juxtaposition to be so fascinated with and interested in food and to be going out to restaurants that had polenta on their menu while I was writing about the Irish famine. But it gave me a really like I've always been interested in history as well as food, and I'm always fascinated with the stories behind where things come from and how where things come out of. And I think the famine had a huge impact on Ireland and Irish food for very many years, because if you've survived a famine, then it's nearly like a sin to take pleasure in food, and to
Yeah.
be particular about it and to be saying, oh, I prefer this or prefer that. Now, that's a very umbrella kind of a look at it, but I do think that it had a huge impact. And also, obviously, the Catholic Church would have had a huge impact on food and the way that it was treated in Ireland. But then we come up to the present day when we have all the food we could possibly want on the doorstep and access to so many different flavors, so many different cultures, so many different ingredients. And I live in like a 19th century cottage in North Cork. So, it's an incredible world that we have access to these days.
Well, it's funny because I've seen such a change in my lifetime. When I was a kid, I think all that most of us knew of Irish food, of course, you've always heard is corned beef and cabbage, I think is the thing you'd always hear. And I always have people disabuse us of that, saying it's not actually Irish. And then I learned, since I've read cookbooks and there's been so much like information, like programs on television, and now I've seen like when you go to the store, you'll see the Kerrygold butter and the Kerrygold cheese, and it's a symbol of class. It's like the good stuff, it's like if you want something nice, this is like a demarcation of something of quality. It's been a big change in the last 30 more years. How do you think this has come about?
I think that's a very good point when you're saying that the Kerrygold, the butter and cheese, and both of which are made just down the road from me here, where I'm based in North
Oh,
Cork.
wow.
Uh, we we produce some of the best dairy in the world, incredible dairy, and for many years we didn't seem to know what to do with it. And it's only so I think actually the Irish food revolution, the renaissance of really good food in Ireland, kind of nearly started with the cheesemakers. And we're talking about the cheesemakers that would have been making cheese in West Cork during the 1970s, and who built brick by brick and painstakingly um, an entire Irish cheese industry. And this, we're talking, about very small batch cheeses and things like that from that time. But a lot of those cheesemakers are still in existence today. And if you have a cheesemaker, well, then you might have somebody smoking fish down the road. And if you have somebody smoking fish down the road, there might be a market for good vegetables. And I think it's very much a rolling ball. And definitely the cheesemakers, from what I can see, started it all off. And they started it all off by going for quality, not quantity, um, by appreciating what was around them, because many of them started making cheese from excess milk that they either threw away, or there was no market for it at the time. So I do think that Ireland has, yeah, and is a world leader in dairy, in the dairy revolution. But it very much started down in West Cork, all these ladies, and they were all lady cheesemakers at the time. Veronica Steele, and particularly would have of Millene's, would have been one of the four at the forefront of that. And she told me once that she was brushing the floor in her kitchen at night time, dreaming about having an Irish cheese industry. So I've always loved that idea, that the one person with a dream. Now, it wasn't just Veronica, but it that's where things came out of. People had dreams, and they ran with them.
Well, it certainly has worked because I think it's a point of note. Like if you're at a dinner party and they're having hors d'oeuvres or whatever, people can go, well, that's Irish cheese, and it's like a mark of distinction, like French wine, etc. It's like a point of pride.
And the good Irish butter, you can't beat that.
Oh yeah, I always like to get that. My wife sometimes like kind of frets at my expenditure on that, but I'm like, it's worth it. You'll love it, and she does. She likes her butter, so.
Yeah, well, you know what? Spend money on the simple good things, and it enhances every meal then.
Oh yeah. Now, I want to talk. You mentioned your blog, BiblioCook. Now, you started that early. You were an early adapter of the blog, and you started yours in 2005. What was the reaction like when you came out with it? And over the years, you've had it for quite a while, and you're still running it. What's the
Yes.
response been?
Well, I just in 2005, I started it really as occupational therapy. Um, I didn't realize it at the time, but my friend set it up for me because I'd had an accident where I'd fractured my skull and lost a lot of words. This is when I lived in New Zealand.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And well, I'm here and I'm talking to you, and
Yeah.
I'm able to put my words together. But it was set up for me in that way. I didn't really kind of realize it at the time because I was a little bit uh, not, shall we say, not of the full shilling, and it really became a place where I could write about food, and it was my space. And because I had been used to working online, I'd worked in the national broadcasters online section for many years at that stage, including in the first Irish food website, which, as I said, didn't last very long. But I knew how to do it, and I could write and I could practice my, like as well, Dean, it's like the more you write the better you get. So it's kind of like a space where I could practice my writing. It gave me an excuse to talk to producers. It gave me an excuse to try new recipes. It gave me an excuse to buy cookbooks. Not that I particularly needed those, because you're looking at the wall of them behind me.
You do need them. You need them absolutely.
Yes, absolute necessity. So it was really important for me because it was my space. Now, I never expected other people to really look at it. I think the first time I got a comment from somebody that wasn't my mother, I nearly dropped, because it wasn't what I thought. And it Ireland at the time had no food blogs initially, and then a handful of food blogs. We all got to know each other. And then in 2000 or 2010, my friend and colleague Kristen Jensen, we set up the Irish Food Bloggers Association. So that was with the idea. Now, there were 30 blogs when we set it up. So that the whole idea behind the association was to gather people together, because we were both freelancers working from home. So we needed an excuse to kind of get out of the house and see people in real life. And it was an excuse for people to come together. It was a place where we could discover other people's food blogs then as well. And we also wanted to kind of promote the whole thing about Irish food. If you're going to like if you're going to be blogging about food in Ireland, talk about all the great Irish producers. So we had great fun with that for a few years. Like, we used to organize, and it was all about as well about promoting quality of writing, photography. We had like standards. We were working with the Standards Authority of Ireland to kind of keep an eye on, like, at the time there were no real rules about blogging or taking gifts or anything like that. So we were very much wanting to just have everything above board, and let everybody, if you are on a press trip, tell people about it. Don't just write about the hotel or something like that. So that was great fun at the time, and we made many, many friends through it. But then suddenly, and you'll probably remember this, when the marketing people suddenly started to get interested in the bloggers. So we spent a lot of time then kind of fending off inquiries from marketing people. And it was a bit like, well, we didn't set up the IFBA to make money or to gain from it. We wanted to develop a community. and which we managed to do. And then it got to the stage where we either had to kind of cut down on our own work to look after it or let it go. And at the time, both Kristen and I were involved in the Irish Food Writers Guild as well. So we kind of took our community building fun and plans and ideas into that. And that is the guild is something that predates both of us. It predates blogs. It goes back a long time now, but it was another space where we could be able to communicate with colleagues and people who were of a similar mind, shall we say, who are really interested in food. So it was an interesting episode.
Now, the blogs and like the Food Writing Guild, and seeing the echo of this going out into the web sphere and the world, and seeing people reading articles or looking for articles on Irish food, was that really unusual as being a person from Ireland to see an interest abroad in all this? I mean, I know that the writers in Ireland are talking about it among themselves, but there are people that are looking in and saying, "Oh, this interests me too." And was unusual to see an outside interest come in?
I think what's been really interesting is to see that people now are starting to have a perception of Ireland as being other than the corned beef and cabbage.
Yeah.
For so long, it's just been a very kind of one-dimensional idea of food in Ireland. So I think that Ireland has so much more to offer, particularly once you get outside Dublin and you start traveling around the countryside. When I came back to Ireland after living in New Zealand for a while, I came back in 2005, and at that stage, you traveled around, and the miss to hit ratio with like coffee shops or restaurants was quite high. And then, over that space of time, like over the last 15, 16 years, things have transformed. So, you can go, like Mitchelstown is my nearest town down the road. It's quite a small town, and there's like a chocolatier, a fabulous cafe doing great coffees and brunches. There's some really good old school cafes and restaurants as well. And go back to 2005, there was only one of those there. So it has changed a lot, the food scene has, and it's just great to have people interested in it and interested in going out and looking for it.
Now you are a graduate of the Ballymaloe Cooking School. Can you talk about your time there and what it was like?
Oh, Ballymaloe, that was an experience with a capital E. Um, so I went to Ballymaloe in 2007, and at the time I was leaving my permanent and pensionable job in the national broadcaster to become a freelance food journalist. So as you can imagine, Dean, this went down very well with my parents,
Yeah.
and
Oh yeah.
you know the feeling.
Oh yeah. Well, I'm a
So
parent of adults, so yeah, I know what that's like.
so I think as well. So it was a good way for me to transition was and I had saved money, put money away for this. So it was a good way for me to transition was to go to Ballymaloe, because then you tell people you're leaving the good job and they're like, oh, and you're going to be a freelance journalist. And they're like, oh, and then you say you're going to Ballymaloe for 3 months en route to that. And they're like, ah. So it's a pure luxury at any time in your life to have 3 months when you just spend it cooking. And Ballymaloe was incredible. Like, obviously, that's all you do when you're down there. But not only the cooking, the reason I chose to go to Ballymaloe is not just the fact that it's down the road from here, like it's about an hour's drive away, but it was the fact that Darina Allen's ethos I respected so much. I had grown up watching Darina on television and
Right.
talking about butter and cream and milk and good things at a time when we had the low fat revolution. So, she was like a pilloried, yeah, like people thought that, she was crazy using butter in her sauces and cream in her with her cakes and things like that. Now, I love to see, but I totally believed in her because as far as I'm concerned, butter makes everything better.
Yep.
Um, and I'm glad to see that she's been it's definitely turned full circle, and we're back to real proper food again. But also, so it's not just the butter, but the fact that it's situated on an organic farm. That you the first morning you're there, you learn about compost and you go off planting seeds. While you're there, you go out with the gardeners and you pick the produce for that day, for the work you'll be doing in the kitchen that day. So I tell you, Dean, you're not going to waste any of those carrots because you've been up at like 7 o'clock in the morning to pull them on a cold winter's morning.
Oh yeah.
So you develop a real appreciation for food, and also it's that notion. And bear in mind now, 2007, it was kind of pre all the restaurants putting their producers on the menus, but they have been doing that at Ballymaloe for so long. And it's been something that I think has changed the face of Irish food, and has really brought so much joy to people as well. Because if you have good food on your plate, and Dorina was able to communicate this to people through her columns in the Irish Examiner, through her books, through her television programs, and also through the cookery school. So it was a fabulous 3 months. Hard work now, I have to admit, but
I can imagine.
definitely worth it.
This episode is sponsored by Culinary Historians of Northern California, a Bay Area educational group dedicated to the study of food, drink, and culture in human history. To learn more about this organization and their work, please visit their website at www.chnorcal.org. I want to ask you about your first book. You're the co-author of the book Sláinte. Did I pronounce that
Yes,
correctly?
you did indeed.
The Complete Guide to Irish Craft Beer and Cider, and that was in 2014. I got a chance to look through this book, and it's really wonderful. And I like it that it gave me some instruction on craft beer and cider specifically. That we don't always, we have some access to cider here, and it's becoming more popular in the United States. But I think it used to be pretty hard to find.
Yeah, I was interested actually to learn that by talking to some Americans around the time when Sláinte came out, because it wasn't uh, I wasn't aware that cider was difficult to get your hands on. But my co-author Kristen, like Kristen Jensen, and I have been working together for many years. We like she's American by birth, so she came at it from the perspective of having been kind of noticed the craft beer scene in the States before she moved to Ireland, and then just being in a tasting one night, at a beer tasting I was doing one night, and tasting a glass of stout and going, oh, this is not Guinness, this is not Murphy's, this is not Beamish, this is something completely totally different. And and I came at it from the perspective of somebody who, like, my partner's a Kiwi, and I used to live with him and his partner, or his now business partner, who's an Aussie. And we'd go to the three of us would go to the pub, and they'd be like, what, there's no decent beer here. And I said, look, there's plenty of taps up there, and I go up and get yourself a pint, stop giving out to me. And then I went and I lived in New Zealand, Dean, and I kind of had to turn around and apologize to the boys for my disrespect. I had no idea that there was this kind of range of beers available. So I spent my time in New Zealand making up for lost time, and going out there and just actively tasting and discovering and finding all these fabulous beers. And then I came back to Ireland, and there was nothing like that. And I saw the Irish craft beer scene starting up and kind of emerging, and I knew that there were lots of people who wanted to try the beer but were a bit scared of it and didn't know where to start, or you know what's a lager even? People who'd been drinking Heineken or Bud for years were like, but what's, but that's beer. What's this lager you're trying to press upon me?
Yeah.
So it was, yeah, it was a really interesting time. And it was kind of like again, a wild west of lots of small breweries starting up. It was really exciting time on the scene. And I think, again, Kristen and I came at it from the perspective of, we were newbies. We wanted to know, like, about tasting it. We didn't want to just knock it back. We knew that, like, if you taste beer properly, you get so much more from it. And we wanted to show people that you can take this gorgeous Irish beer and pair it with Irish food and use it in Irish food. And it was, again, we, myself and Kristen, have been singing from the same hymn sheet and banging our drum about Irish food and Irish produce for many years. And Sláinte was very much part of that.
I think we oftentimes don't. I think there is some apple cider, alcoholic cider that is for sale, but they're increasingly selling the very sweet stuff. It's almost like soda pop. And I was able to get my hand and try some craft cider from the British Isles, and it was really interesting getting to try the variation. Some were so dry they're almost like a brut champagne. And cooking with them was really great because I got to make some amazing bread and deglaze like some pork dishes with it and just make some great, gravies. And it just was really nice to get a chance to cook with that. And I saw that your book really reflected that.
Well, you're totally right, Dean. It's like, when you'd put in a slug of wine into a dish, well, why not use your local cider, your local beer? And, what grows together generally goes together. So if you've got something, like if you've got some nice pork that's been raised just down the road, and then you have a cider that's made, not in the not too far away from you. I know you're having problems getting access to that, but you know the flavors are going to work really, really well together. And yeah, we wanted to demystify it, I think, really, with Sláinte, because we wanted to make people go, this is accessible, this is, and also, this is an industry which is sustainable, and we want it to be here for the long road. Because after I came back from New Zealand that time, I haven't touched a pint of uh, mainstream lager ever since, because no.
No, it's becoming like that in the Bay
Just
Area
can't.
too. The craft beer is just taking off in the United States. It's wonderful to see. I like seeing people producing local stuff. It always makes me very happy. Now, I really love your most recent book, the official Guinness Cookbook that came out last year. It's just really stunning. And I didn't know what to expect, but I was really surprised. Do you think a lot of people have had the same reaction to it?
Well, I think the temptation is, when you see something like the official brand cookbook, is to think that these are a whole pile of recipes thrown together. They could be recipes from anywhere. They just add brand as applicable.
Yeah,
Like that there should be a template on there somewhere for this kind of thing. And this is not that book.
not at all.
Uh,
No, absolutely not.
when my editor that worked with me from Insight, so like I was approached by Insight Editions, which is an independent publishing company, and my editor Hilary had seen that I do lots of cooking and baking with beer, and she just sent me an random email, and said, would you be interested in doing this? Would you be, interested in writing a cookbook? And I'm like, yes, because I love playing with beer. I love the flavors that it brings to a dish. I love the chemicals that it brings to a dish, in terms of, like, raising agent and things like that. And there's so much potential there for it. So I knew that the official Guinness cookbook could be a really good fun to write, from my perspective as well. And the testing, I have to say, went down very well with the family. And so it has been, a real pleasure to work on this. But yeah, I think you're right about perceptions, that people would come to this thinking one thing, but then not realizing that, you know I'm an author with a track record. I've been developing recipes for 20 years. I've been writing about food about the same length of time. So, I'm not just going to fling a bunch of ingredients together and call it a recipe.
The range is so dizzying because there's such a range of stuff here. And you start off with like granola, which I did not expect, pomegranate molasses roasted chickpeas, a really just delicious looking stout peanut and miso noodle salad, which the flavor profiles, I can just even imagine it already. It's just really, were you just kind of allowed to go crazy and just invent all kinds of neat stuff? I mean, what were you first thinking when you had to like do this? Was it intimidating, or were you like, let's get going at this?
It was scary initially, really scary. And so initially what we were trying to, so Hillary was still working to get the sign off. So basically how Insight Edition works is they get the writer on board, they pay, like, it's a flat fee for the writer. They get whoever they want to license the book from on board, and then they're the middleman basically. So they do that kind of work, which is great. So that wasn't on my plate. But so she just said, write a table of contents and we'll pitch it to Guinness and see how we get on. And now, you're picking out the recipes that you think are kind of crazy, but I can tell you there was a lot crazier in the
Oh
in the
yeah.
first draft. And so I was allowed to kind of just put, throw everything in there. And now, Hillary did rein me back, and justifiably so, because you do need a really good traditional Guinness and beef stew. You do need a porter cake. You do
Yeah.
need these kind of solid recipes as the backbone of the book. But there's nothing to say that you can't have a whole lot of fun with the other ones then in the meantime.
Well, you had such, I mean, they're all inventive. And like, as somebody who likes stout and I like to cook, I kept thinking, wow, these are really brilliant pairings. And I like that you use different types of Guinness in there. There was one that really, I haven't tried it yet, and I can't wait to, because I love beef cheeks. And you had one that was the beef cheek chorizo and foreign stout casserole with dumplings. And I'm like, that is just freaking genius. That is just amazing. And I just love the idea of that. Do you have any, is there a dish that kind of stands out for you that you really thought really was magical?
Well, you know what? You've put your finger on it there, Dean, because that beef cheek recipe, I love beef cheeks. They're
Me too.
so delicious and unctuous and easy to cook. And then you put them with the stout and the chorizo, and the dumplings are like your added little kind of a fillip of loveliness on top. But there's nothing to say that you can't divide these out. You could have it with potatoes, or you could do it
Yeah.
with pastry. Pastry topping is actually great on it.
Yeah.
When I'm making that, I make like 2 or 3 times the recipe, so that I can stash some in the freezer and have some for a rainy day, because it is one of my favorites. And then also what I love doing is using stout with chocolate and in desserts. And one of the things that really stood out for me, and I was doing, bear in mind, I was writing and testing this during lockdown last year. I did a salted caramel and chocolate Guinness draft tart.
Yeah.
Oh. And it's so easy. That's the one, like I wanted these recipes all to be achievable. I didn't want them to go on over 3 or 4 pages. And I wanted it to be something that you look at it and you go, oh, I've got most of those ingredients in my kitchen and I don't need to get special equipment to do it. So yeah, there's a lot. Oh, but listen, they're my children, Dean. You can't be asking me the favorite. I
Yeah,
got caught
it
there
is a
now,
little
didn't I?
unfair.
Yeah.
I love the way Guinness pairs with chocolate, though. It's so wonderful. It adds almost kind of a treacly kind of flavor that it's just so good. Always a winner. Now, I want to ask you, who are some of the cookbook authors that you enjoy reading? That unfair question, sorry.
Well, no, I think it's a great question, because it really made me think about the books that I've been pulling off the shelves more often than not lately. Um, So again, to go back to my friend Kristen Jensen, friend and colleague, she has developed an imprint called Blosta, and it is about creating all these. I'm holding up a book here in front of you, Dean. This is the first book
You
in a
have my
series.
favorite. I could see my favorite word on that book.
Yep, you're there. So it's called Tacos. It's by Lily Ramirez Foran. Lily is a Mexican, and she moved to Ireland to marry her now husband Alan, and she's been here for about 20 years. She has a shop in Dublin called Picado Mexican, where she does lots of cooking courses, and she's amazing. Lily is just amazing. She's so opinionated. She's like, you can't mention the word Tex-Mex to her. You don't want to mix up your pico de gallo and your salsa. There's a lot of things, but she's opinionated in a way is she wants to teach people about food, and she wants to teach people about Mexican food. And I, you know, I first got to know Lily through the Irish Food Bloggers Association. Herself and myself and Kristen we did a cooking course with her at one stage, and it kind of set her off on doing lots of other things. But Kristen then, when she decided to set up her own publishing company, she wanted to create a space for new voices in Irish food. And these are the voices of people who can't get a publishing deal, because they don't have the right numbers necessarily, or because somebody's like, oh, we already have this on our books. So she set up the publishing company, she crowdfunded it, got huge amount of goodwill and interest in it. And Tacos is the first of her books. So it's, I suppose, why I love, one of the reasons I love Tacos is because it's the accumulation of what Lily has been trying to teach me for many years, and I finally got my tortillas right. It's, taken me a long time, but this book, she had a real good step by step in it. And it's the accumulation of what Kristen and I have been talking about for a long time. It's like, here, there's space for more people to write about food in a different way. It doesn't all have to be about diets or slimming books, or I don't know. There's so many boring books out there on the market, and this is not a boring book. So I would say,
I'm getting
what
my hands on that one as soon as I can.
oh, definitely do. I know it's been making to the States, so it's going really well. And this is another book, Mamushka, by
Yes.
Alia Hercules. So I bought this book when it came out in 2014, 2015. I'm not 100% sure. I got it for Christmas one of those years. And I just loved the way she introduced me to a whole new style of cooking, new ingredients, a new, like, my knowledge of Ukraine was, very, very limited. I
Right.
think we've all got to know much more about the geography
Oh
and the
yeah.
people since then. But I thought Mamushka was such a wonderful book because Alia is all about telling stories, and it's stories of her family, and it's stories of the foods that her family loves and cooks, and she wants to bring this into the world. I've got Summer Kitchens as well, which is her most recent one, but I think I prefer this one in lots of ways. And I think, I follow her on Instagram, and she has been having such a terrible time trying to articulate what's been going on in Ukraine. Her parents and her brother are in different parts of the country, and she's been trying to support them, and it's heartbreaking. And I suppose, pulling Mamushka off the shelves and rereading it is, these are the people behind the headlines. You know, they say however many dead in a bombardment today, and that's just numbers. But when you look at a book like this, you understand that these are people, and these
Yeah,
are people,
absolutely.
yeah, who were like, you know, they were cooking in their own kitchens just a couple of weeks ago, and now they're refugees on the border, and how life can change so fast.
Oh
So
yes.
yeah, so I think it's been, it definitely has sent me back to that, and there, she has so many wonderful recipes in that book as well. So I would encourage anybody who's interested in learning more about Ukraine. It's a wonderful way to learn about any country and any culture is through food, and that's one of the loveliest ones. um I've got to, I dug out I was taking, just put my hand on the right of myself, where on the shelf that's closest to me. I was going, these are the books that I'm sticking on at the moment. So Ripe Figs by
Ooh.
Yasmin Khan.
Ah,
So good. So
looks
good.
nice.
She is another writer who understands that food is about stories and about people. She like so it's subtitled Recipes and Stories from the Eastern Mediterranean. So it's very much about uh, refugees in the Eastern Mediterranean. So I think this came out about 2 years ago. So, the huge influx of refugees from Syria and from lots of other countries. And Yasmin went there and documented their stories, documented the kitchens and things like that. And what it comes back to with Olia's book and with Yasmin's book, and also with Lily's book, is that food isn't just about what you're putting in your mouth. Food is about the people who make it, the hands that prepare it. Is it prepared with love? Is it prepared, is it just thrown together? It's about the where it came from. It's about how the recipe came to you. Is it a family recipe? There's so much bound in food, and it's one of the reasons why I just love working in the food world. It's because you can use food as a jumping off point for so many different things. And yeah, and those books I think particularly sum it up for me at the moment.
Well, that brings to mind another question. I know that many people from Ireland I've talked to have been talking about how much food from all over the world is coming to Ireland, and especially the cities where there's all kinds of restaurants now, and people are eating Mexican food. They're eating food from all over. And I remember I had a student worker once, and I was talking to him. I asked him about Irish food, and he just smiled and he goes, "Well, if you want a really good traditional Irish dish for St. Patrick's Day, you're going to make yourself an Indian curry." He goes, "There's something that a Irishman loves more than a curry." And I thought I was laughing. He goes, "No, I'm serious." And I'm like, all right, all right. Is that true?
He obviously hasn't met my father. uh, so there was a few years ago, there was like one of these online votes, and the most popular dish in Ireland was a Thai green curry.
Yeah.
so, so I can see where he's coming from. And like a lot of people, you're not going to send out and go to a restaurant that's doing your Guinness and beef stew
Yeah.
necessarily, because you know your mom can make that and they can
Yeah.
make a better version. Why would you
Yeah.
go to a place that does that?
Yeah.
So I think that, yeah, like, because St. Patrick's Day now, of course, is Thursday this week, and we've got an extra. So we've Thursday off, obviously, because the bank holiday, and then on Friday we've got an extra bank holiday for special concession for this year.
Nice.
And like St. Patrick's Day is all about gathering together with your family. It's about standing on the roadside while the local like the local farmer drives past with his trailer, and there's like somebody doing Irish dancing on the back of the trailer, like, because we have to have the parade now, Dean. That's very
Yeah.
important.
No, no,
And
we do
parades
too.
parades in small towns in Ireland are nothing like what you see on television. They're very entertaining in that kind of a way.
Yeah.
And you're always freezing and you want to just come home to something nice and warm. So again, I go back to the stew. The stew is always one of my favorite things. But also, when you think about, again, local food, I'd like say, yes, actually yesterday it was my parents were here, and one of my neighbors had given me pork belly. So I cooked it like in the book. There's a recipe for pork chops with Guinness draft and blackcurrant sauce. So I
Mm,
used those flavors with
nice.
the pork belly from my neighbors up the road. And yeah, that's just it, that's I love that's what I love about recipes as well, is you can take the ideas behind them and apply them to other areas. But yeah, so yeah, that's the kind of thing that my dad would like. If I produced an Indian curry for him, if he came over on Patrick's Day, or on a Sunday like he does normally, I'm not sure he'd be coming back. So it's,
Much like
you
my
know,
father.
well, and Dean, I make a great curry. I really love my curries, but
Me too.
it's not what my dad would consider a dinner, because there's no spuds in that.
Yeah. Now, what are you making for St. Patrick's Day this year? Are you making a stew?
It depends on whether or not we get out to the parade, because we'll look out the window, and if the weather is miserable, we might do it anyway. But yeah, it's stew is kind of my default setting for St. Patrick's Day, because you have that ease of a stew that you can put it on, stick it in the oven on a low heat, go off to the parade, freeze yourself to death, and come back to a house that just smells amazing. So the only thing will be to decide between the beef cheek one or the traditional. So it's a bit of a play around and see what I can get my hands on, because I haven't ordered my beef cheeks.
Well, you'll win either way. It'll be good either way.
That's true.
Now, what's next for you?
Well, I'm currently the chair of the Irish Food Writers Guild. So we have, like, after 2 years of not being able to gather together, we've got kind of busy plans coming up now for this summer. And again, it's all about promoting Irish food. It's all about drawing attention to what people are doing, and on not very much money, like in the back of beyonds, and sometimes someone is producing a really good cheese, or somebody has decided to start brewing kombucha using
Yeah.
Irish ingredients. You've probably got a lot of that at the
Oh,
moment as
yeah.
well. And say, like, last week we just released, or we just announced the winners of the 2022 Irish Food Writers Guild Awards, which included a woman who is smoking fish down in West Cork, and she's been doing it. Oh, she's one of the very early adopters. Since the late 70s, I think she started doing it, and she only smokes wild fish. And Dean, knowing how, like, that's so rare, to just smoke wild fish. She doesn't do any farmed or organic salmon or anything like that. So yeah, I want to continue to document what people are doing around the country, in terms of having fabulous food and letting people know about that. And I think, we're all eyes are still on Ukraine, and hoping that
Yeah.
that they're safe over there, and that things can wind down without too much death and destruction. And I suppose in the end of the day, I'm very fortunate. I'm able to
Yes.
put a good stew on the table, and enjoy that with my family. And in the end of the day, there's nothing as important as being with your family and having good food.
Well, having said that, Caroline, I'll let you go make dinner for your family. You've been a lovely guest. Thank you for being on the program. I've really enjoyed getting a chance to talk to you. I'd talk to you again in a heartbeat if you ever want to come back on the show.
Oh, thank you very much, Dean. It's a pleasure to talk to you. And yes, I'm sure that I'll see small faces pressed up against the window now in a few minutes going, "Where's our dinner?" So take care of yourself,
You as
and
well.
a pleasure to chat.
Pleasure to chat with you too. Thank you. Bye.
All right.
That was my conversation with Caroline Hennessy, author of the official Guinness Cookbook. She was a great informative guest, and I really loved her recipes. I found them to be very, very inspiring, and I really am enjoying getting a chance to work my way through that cookbook. On Monday, we will have author Hilary Boynton of the book Heal Your Gut Cookbook. She is also head of the school lunch program, School of Lunch, introducing children to whole food in Los Angeles. I really enjoyed getting a chance to talk to Hilary. She was a really great guest, and I really do want to have her back on again. Next Friday, we will also have the food writer Diane Jacob, who has the book Will Write for Food in its 4th edition, and also her book, The United States of Pizza. I really found her a very informative guest, talking about food writing and food editing, and just the whole world of food writing in general. Really had a great chance talking to Diane, and I want you to tune in on Friday for that. I want to additionally thank Kitty Cat Fan Club and Asian Men Records for letting us use Talk About Love as our theme and end cap song. You can check the band out and other acts by going to the link in the bio. I hope you all have a great weekend and have enjoyed your St. Patrick's Day festivities. Until next week, keep cooking.
I've been getting